Welcome to Hunden Happy Hour, where we bring you the stories of transformative destination real estate development and the people who make them happen. I'm Rob Hunden, CEO and founder of Hunden Partners. We lead complex destination development from vision to reality, forged over decades in hundreds of cities across numerous countries. Our playbook turns vision into finance-built and successful projects. In today's episode, we are talking about legacy and destination development in Fort Worth, Texas, an exciting city whose visitor economy has exploded in the last several years. I've had the pleasure of working there for 25 years, and Fort Worth has been known for cowboys and culture, the great Fort Worth historic stockyards, which have really exploded in the last few years, even though they were already the number one tourist attraction in all of the DFW Metroplex. All the investments they've made there over the last several years have doubled their visitation and dwell time. So it's been a huge success. Also, downtown is exploding with expansion and renovation of the convention center that we've worked on for 25 years, and the Texas A&M campus coming to downtown, as well as the relatively new Dickies Arena that came on board about 10 years ago. So there's a lot to be excited about. Here to help us tell the story of one of the country's fastest growing markets and visitor destinations are two of Fort Worth's leaders in that city's growth. Bob Jameson, President and CEO of Visit Fort Worth, and Mike Crum, Deputy Director of Special Events for the city of Fort Worth. I've worked with Bob for 25 years and Mike for the last 5 years since COVID. And before that, Bethany DeRose on our team worked with Mike in Charlotte, North Carolina. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Good to be with you, Rob.
Great to be with you, Rob.
We go back many, many years. I started working in Fort Worth 25 years ago when I first met Bob, and I think you were the GM of the Marriott at the time. And Mike, you came along in 2020, and we're going to talk about the backstory and how this all came together. Bob, start off our look back at major milestones in your career, pausing at some different key points along the way in the development of downtown Fort Worth, especially around the convention center, but also the stockyards. And then Mike, you've certainly been involved with Fort Worth's growth, especially in the last 5 to 6 years since you came from Charlotte. What are some of the career milestones, including your time before you moved to Fort Worth in 2020? So we're gonna really get your guys' origin stories and get us up to date for how your stories sort of intersected with Fort Worth, Charlotte, and Hunden Partners.
Let me start because I've got the farthest to go back. I graduated from college and started my career in the hotel business. Following that, I worked for Marriott Hotels at 2 different locations in California, and then was at Camelback Inn in Scottsdale, Arizona. And it was after being there for 3 years that I was presented with the opportunity to come to Fort Worth and to be part of a renaming and a new ownership, or same ownership, but a different management company formed around what is known now as the Renaissance Worthington Hotel. And so for the first 14 years that I was there and working as general manager, it was an independent hotel, one hotel company as part of a 35-block downtown development owned and managed by the Bass family here in Fort Worth. In 1999, just a little bit before Rob and I connected, Marriott came back into my life as the buyer of the hotel and the management company, and I returned to Marriott Hotels, where I worked for the next 14 years as well. Getting into some of the work that we eventually did together, Rob, the convention center project was originally opened as a civic center, if you will, and it was owned by the county, not the city. In the mid-90s, the city purchased the building and launched it on the beginning of a renovation project, expanding its capacity and updating the building. And I think you entered the picture when we started looking at how do we find a hotel partner for
That's right.
the newly renovated and expanded convention center.
And then when did you take over Visit Fort Worth?
2013, after 28 years at the Worthington Hotel, again working for the Basses for half that time and for Marriott the other half that time, the opportunity to come to Visit Fort Worth presented itself, and I was fortunate to be given that opportunity.
And just to go back, so some major milestones. Yeah, the renovation of the convention center was around circa 2000, and we were both. It was a very noteworthy time, but then yes, it really precipitated the need for a headquarters hotel, and so we went through some different machinations when I was part of a prior firm, and we had a competitive effort to bid out the opportunity to build a convention headquarters hotel. And after several machinations of that, the first one of which was a publicly owned asset that didn't go anywhere for obvious political reasons that typically happen. Omni came along in the second go round and said, hey, we'll do this as a public-private partnership. And so it entered into agreements with the city in order to build the 600 plus key Omni hotel at the Fort Worth Convention Center right across the street. That opened in 2009 and was very successful. And it helped Fort Worth really keep its downtown and tourism economy growing instead of shrinking like the rest of the country was during the Great Recession, which was very unusual, and it put you guys on the map. Then Hunden Partners came back into involvement with the city in 2013, right at the time when you took over the helm of Visit Fort Worth, when you were starting to consider an expansion of the convention center, either an expansion of the Omni or a second headquarters hotel, and then the financing of all of that, as well as the development of Dickies Arena. That was all contemplated and happening right around 2013.
When you go back to the renovation expansion in the early 2000s, which finished in 2004, I believe, over the course of a couple of years, there was a limited availability of funds, as is often or always the case. And the expansion and renovation could only encompass 2/3 of the building. There was an arena that had been in place since mid-1960s as part of that building that that we needed to find an alternative arena site. And so that part, what you might have considered in that initial project, a third phase of the building project or center project, had to wait. So by the time I was coming on board with in Visit Fort Worth, a mechanism for funding that arena project and an ultimate second round of upgrade and expansion of the convention center had been devised, the project financing zone through legislation in Texas. And so that opportunity is what put us on a path to the project that is in process today.
I can't believe it's been 13 years since we started to work on that. But the project finance zone is a very unique tool to the state of Texas that allows for certain state taxes within a 3-mile radius of major projects like the Dickies Arena or the Convention Center, or both in your case, to recapture incremental state hotel taxes at a 6% rate that then can fund these major projects. And so that Fort Worth was the pioneer in that effort. Later on, Dallas jumped on board, but that wasn't for another almost 10 years. So the Dickies Arena was able to be financed in that way, or at least 50% of it. The other 50% was private. And then, as you say, the other increments started to collect so that over time, the expansion of the convention center could commence. And so that's when Mike entered the picture. So, Mike, let's go back and talk about your career leading up to when you came to Fort Worth.
I am a proud graduate of the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I am also a proud graduate of the Masters of Sports Administration program at Ohio University.
Nice.
My first venture professionally was with the Pacer Basketball Corporation, working in the division of that organization that ran the now demolished Market Square Arena. In 1988, I got a phone call from Steve Camp, who was then the managing director of the Auditorium Coliseum Convention Center Authority in Charlotte, and ended up moving to Charlotte in early 1989 to serve as that organization's chief financial officer. Didn't expect it, but I ended up staying in Charlotte for nearly 32 years. Was involved in a whole series of transformative venue projects like Charlotte's second Coliseum, the building of the Charlotte Convention Center, several renovation projects, the construction of the NASCAR Hall of Fame, the loss of an NBA team, the attraction of another, and the building of the downtown arena today that's known as the Spectrum Center. In 2019, I got a call from a recruiter about Fort Worth, came out here to learn more about Fort Worth's story. It so reminded me of the development of Charlotte, a place with incredible growth, the ambition to be more of a destination than it had been, the will to do that, and the means to do that. It's a very powerful combination. And so I arrived in Fort Worth February of 2020. Great timing, right?
Yes.
Because 6 weeks later, all those great plans had to get shelved for a couple of years. But we are subsequently back on track now, and the future is bright for this community.
So we were working to continually revise the funding mechanisms together and figure out what was possible, the art of the possible. And of course, inflation and the cost of construction continued to go up. And so it was always a moving target. So Mike, talk to us about when you landed in Fort Worth. COVID hits, we have to sort of rejigger everything. Post-COVID, then we go through the process of updating the studies that had happened starting in 2013-14 for the expansion of the center, new or additional rooms and headquarter hotels, and then how do you pay for it all? And then the inflated cost of everything then required yet another study to figure out, well, if he had to pick between a bigger ballroom and a bigger exhibit hall, what do you do? What's going to have the most impact so that what you build in phase 3A, 3B is what I still call it, is impactful as you can afford. So take us through that process and where things stand now with the building.
We had to shelve the convention center project and basically every other major capital project that was funded out of the city's culture and tourism funds until the market started to recover from the impact of the pandemic. We came out the other side of this incredible recovery of the market from a hotel revenue standpoint, and I think we were back on track, maybe surpassing expectations by 2023. That was great news. But then at the same time, our $377 million convention center expansion and renovation project had turned into a $700 million project. That required us to do some new cost estimating and some new programming and some new conceptual design, and then to work with the city manager's office and the folks in city finance to figure out what was possible to try and keep this project moving forward. Of course, Rob, your team was involved in reprojecting what the market was capable of supporting from a hospitality tax standpoint. And really that led us to a referendum that was to increase the hotel occupancy tax in Fort Worth by 2 percentage points. And that was overwhelmingly approved, actually by like an astronomical 75-25 margin. Really was a message that people here understand the value of the visitor economy. With that in hand, and some additional support from the mayor and council in terms of American Rescue Plan Act funding, we were able to jumpstart our project. As you know, we were obligated to keep the convention center open because of pledges that we had made to the Omni when that deal was done. So we had to take a two-step approach to the expansion project. First phase, $95 million. That was where we built new food and beverage, backhouse food and beverage facilities for our Trinity food and beverage team. We built a new southeast entrance to respond to the incredible development that's going on with the Texas A&M campus, which is our next door neighbor. We demolished the 1980s annex, which meant that we had to rebuild and expand our loading dock facility. And probably most importantly, we straightened out Commerce Street. The street had a salient into it to go around the county's annex project. We restored Commerce to its original path. And what that did for us was that's created a piece of property east of the convention center that we aspire to build a second headquarters hotel on. Hopefully going to market with that opportunity here in the next couple of months.
Lots of planning and effort to finally get to this point where this initial phase sets the stage for the reconstruction and straightening of Commerce Street. That opens up several super blocks of development pads that can now be headquarters hotel plus other mixed use development that can enliven the district and activate the district right around the convention center. And then of course the next phase of the convention center is the big one, where you add significant ballroom and meeting room capability, remove the old flying saucers, as some people call it, the sort of the 60-plus-year-old arena component, and really finally fully modernize and expand so that the entire project is fully modernized and ideally with 2 attached or adjacent headquarter hotels.
Yeah, and this is part of Fort Worth's evolution as a destination. We're going to say goodbye to the 1968 arena attached to the convention center. In its place, we'll build traditional convention space, an extension of our contiguous exhibit halls, a second 40,000 square foot ballroom, and then we're more than doubling the facility's breakout space. Just as importantly, we're going to spend over $100 million renovating the legacy portion of the facility. It really hasn't received any investment since those investments in the early 2000s. And so our mission, if we choose to accept it, is to not create equal experiences between old and new, but create equitable experiences so that we don't have a client that somehow feels like they got cheated if they end up in the older part of the building. Very exciting project. We have already funded the remainder of our design work and pre-construction expenses. We expect to mobilize for construction in the fourth quarter of this year, and barring anything unforeseen, the new and improved Fort Worth Convention Center should be ready for business in January of 2030.
What a journey it's been, absolutely. So let's keep the pedal to the metal and get this project done. But it is absolutely a game changer for Fort Worth. And in the meantime, over these 3 decades basically that we're all talking about and have lived through and helped move progress forward, Fort Worth as a market has exploded. It's one of the fastest growing cities and markets in the country. And so with that, there's been uplift and change and opportunity left, right, and center. So you mentioned the Texas A&M downtown campus, where you mentioned off camera that their current phase is about $660 million, and nobody saw that coming. That's right outside the convention center. And then eventually a full build out to over $1 billion, most people expect. And then at the same time, you are involved in the Will Rogers Center, and that's where they added the new Dickies Arena about 10 years ago. And that's been performing very well. But there are other changes afoot to that mega facility, which is, I believe, over 1 million square feet under roof and is programmed almost every single day of the year. So you have a two-piston engine that continues to rock and roll for Fort Worth. So as one of the things that we helped with, where you came at the end of it and Bob was involved in the beginning of it, was the governance study. So when we talk about asset management, we want these things that we pour hundreds of millions of dollars into to be assets, not liabilities, right? And so how do we do that? Well, we do that by optimizing management and marketing. And so we looked at some different ways that the Will Rogers Center and the Fort Worth Convention Center could be owned, operated, marketed, and managed for optimal effect. And so it sounds like the fruits of that analysis are starting to slowly play out, starting first with Will Rogers. So I don't know if Bob wants to take that or Mike or both.
I think the governance study identified really the concept. In today's competitive environment, it's very hard for local governments to compete against the private sector. And so when you have buildings that are run as city departments, you're going to have a lot of challenges in terms of going up against folks who are run in a more entrepreneurial way. I think that really has come to bear out at the Will Rogers complex, where, post-pandemic, the cost of running the facility, 17 buildings on 120 acres, has just skyrocketed. And at the same time, increasing cost means that that's reduced resources for capital projects. And a complex that was started in 1936 needs constant investment just to keep the lights on and the toilets flushing. And so we really went back to the governance study playbook and said, okay, how can we address this? And we have a great partner in Event Facilities Fort Worth. That's the public-private arm of the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo. And they had an interest in taking responsibility for the complex. So, what we're going to do is privatize the management of the complex. We're going to drive down the overall cost of running the facilities on a year-to-year basis. We're going to take that savings and we're going to plow it back into capital projects. It's not a profit motive venture for our partner in this as an arm of the stock show and rodeo, the city's preeminent Western equestrian event. They have a vested interest in the quality of the facilities at the Will Rogers complex, and so they are highly motivated to make this new deal work financially.
Aligning incentives, aligning business and mission plans for the best for everybody. And so then that sets up some other decisions that could come down the pike for management, operation, and marketing of the convention center down the line. And so we'll see there's a whole spectrum of opportunities and directions to go. But in our study, we laid out several that mimic some of the best in the country, which we'll see what happens. But we won't talk about that here today, but we'll see what happens. Bob, one of the biggest hits in Fort Worth's history is the Fort Worth Stockyards. It was already the most visited attraction in the whole DFW Metroplex before its reinvention. But then, and we worked on multiple studies for the private developers of that complex, now it's almost doubled in its visitation, its impact. Length of stay has extended by 20 to 30 minutes or more, because before the Stockyards really was a one-trick pony, because people would come and they would see the Longhorn steers go down exchange and they would take their pictures and maybe buy a couple of trinkets and be on their way. Now it's an entire historic, authentic, mixed-use district with modern restaurants, modern hotels, historic hotels. It's a great mix of authentic uses that are both modern and historic. And so it's really been attractive to so many people. It's really helped Fort Worth's tourism And hotel developers continue, as well as others, to invest in that area. And Taylor Sheridan has his empire sort of based in and around Fort Worth, and so has used the stockyards as a place where they do red carpets and things of that nature. The Hotel Drover is a great centerpiece and anchor of the district as a lifestyle hotel. So, as you think back on the legacy of your career and destination development, Bob, is it gratifying to you to have so many people look at the stockyards as, man, I wish we had something like that in our town?
Just reflecting back on, so much of my time here, and certainly since I've been in this role, with an eye on the entire development, the city's long embrace of its historic beginnings has really given us a marketing message that distinguishes us from other competitors, when we're out trying to tell the story of the city. And for a long time, we talked about it as cowboys and culture, and cowboys was the very clearly defined reference to our historic district in the stockyards, and culture was the only way we could come up with to say, and then everything else. There were so many destinations that I would hear from that would say, gosh, I wish I had something that was as clear and in terms of giving some sense of the destination. And so we've been fortunate in that regard that we've had that Western story to tell, because it certainly from an international visitor standpoint is iconic American, and people are just drawn to it. It's very strong also, of course, domestically. But the district was falling in on itself. There were local folks that activated Billy Bob's, the world's largest honky tonk, as an anchor entity, and then bought up other blocks, and taking these ancient buildings, if you will, that were barely standing up and breathing life into them, changing the economy from pretty strictly a nighttime economy to something more family friendly. And then it was really about 2013, 14 that that a new partnership was struck between the owners of 70 acres of the stockyards, and a real estate development company out of California. And between the two of them, they started developing a vision for how do we bring this district, you know, some new life. And it focused initially on taking 200-year-old buildings that used to be horse and mule barns and repurposing them. And you've already mentioned, and not only are there upscale restaurants run by local restaurateurs, but upscale Western focused shopping and such, as well as office space in there. And what I thought was particularly brilliant was the fact that one of those commercial tenants was a digital marketing company. And so, really, for the first time, you were introducing an element of office, from professional people working down there that were not in the tourism business, but were going to be customers for lunch, customers after hours, and such, and just bringing a different kind of energy in there. So it's been amazing to watch the impact of this. Of course, in addition to the renovation of what is referred to as Mule Alley that runs between those two buildings, was the addition of the Hotel Drover, which introduced the luxury hotel experience to Fort Worth. Something, despite, having some very nice hotels, we just did not have a product to speak to that. And so that also created new opportunities that have played out in other parts of the city in that market segment. So, it's just interesting to think about the energy that exists down there, the popularity of it, looking at the different parts of Fort Worth and the hotel occupants. The stockyards has got unbelievable average rates and occupancy levels, which is, of course, taking the four main hotels that are there, soon to add, a development by White Lodging, two other properties that are just a couple of blocks north of the district, or, the main part of the district as well. So there's a lot of interest in the healthiest hotel market that we've got in town.
All right, Bob and Mike, let's pause the conversation for something we like to call Sip and Spill. This is our quick fire Q&A. It's a chance for our audience to get to know you and Fort Worth a little bit better. Okay, Mike, your favorite happy hour?
Would have to be the bar at Gemelli near my home in the River District.
Mike, how about your favorite art and or cultural venue?
That would have to be the Modern Art Museum here in the Cultural District at Fort Worth.
Bob, your favorite coffee shop?
There is a Avoca Coffee in the near south side. It's a great experience. I'm not a coffee drinker. They've got a great iced green tea.
I think it would have to be Summer Moon in the near south side.
Bob, I'll go back to you. Your favorite citywide or annual event?
Main Street Arts Festival that takes place in April each year and occupies the length of Main Street. Been in place for 40 years and great event.
Mike, how about your favorite dinner reservation?
Oh, that one's easy. Ellerby Fine Foods, on Magnolia Street in Fort Worth's Restaurant District.
Bob, how about your favorite memory of your earliest time in Fort Worth?
I would say it was the first time I was at a rodeo. It was not an experience I'd ever had before, and it was a real opportunity to get a feel for this western part of our city's history.
That's Sip and Spill. And now that we know you and Fort Worth a little bit better, let's jump back in for our final segment. Mike, talk to us about one of your favorite local nonprofits in Fort Worth that many people watching may not know about.
Well, thank you, Rob. I have been a proud board member of an organization called Cancer Care Services. Cancer Care supports cancer patients, cares for caregivers, and empowers survivors to reduce the impact of cancer in Tarrant County. I serve on that board to honor relatives of mine who have fought cancer battles.
We will be going to their website, making a donation as part of this podcast effort, and really thank you for bringing that to our attention. It sounds like an amazing organization, and I'm glad that you're serving on the board. That's great. Now, Bob, you're waltzing into doing a Texas two-step into retirement very shortly. As you look back on your legacy, what are the things, maybe one or two things that you're most proud of that you've accomplished, but also what you've seen your city be able to accomplish while you've been there?
Obviously, I've been asked this question and have had time to think about it. I think it's the fact that we have raised the profile of this industry within this community. In my earliest days, we couldn't really even get the local Chamber of Commerce to have a tourism column in their newsletter. And now it's just, this industry is just understood as the partner it is in the economic development, strategy for the city. And, it's just really encouraging to see the attention and appreciation and support that this industry receives, and the welcome that tourists experience.
Well, you both have so much to be proud of throughout your careers and in Fort Worth in general. Great leadership from the elected officials, from you all, great progress, and more to come.
Rob, thanks so much. I appreciate the long history we've had together and partnerships, and this is, I'm just grateful to be included.
Rob, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the Hunden Happy Hour, and we will see you next time. Hunden Happy Hour is produced by Hunden Partners, hosted by Robin Hunden, recorded in the Hunden Partners offices in Chicago, Illinois.